You've tuned in for another deep dive, and today we're tackling something you sent over. There's been quite the ride in the gaming world, loot boxes.
That's right.
We've got the Press Start to Rant podcast script, and, well, our mission here is to kind of sift through their chat and really get the story. You know, the origins, the psychology behind them, all the controversy, and sort of where things are now.
Yeah, it's a good source for that.
Think of this as like your shortcut to understanding a pretty major part of modern gaming.
Absolutely. And what really jumps out from their discussion is how it tracks this evolution of how games make money, these surprise mechanics.
Yeah.
It's way more than just a digital lucky bag, isn't it? There's all this psychology, economics, even like legal stuff mixed in.
Okay, let's just dive right in then. Alex and Jamie, the hosts from Press Start to Rant, they start off talking about, you know, the good old days.
Yeah.
Buy a game, play the game. That was it. Remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty straightforward.
Oh, definitely. And the shift they talk about is huge, really fundamental. We went from that one simple purchase to, well, constant engagement, trying to get more money after the sale.
Yeah.
And these surprise mechanics, they were a big part of that change, a real catalyst.
They mentioned MapleStory way back in 2004 as an early one.
Mm-hmm. An early example.
But it sounds like Overwatch in 2016, that was the moment loot boxes kind of exploded into the mainstream. What was it about Overwatch? Why then?
Well, Overwatch did it very cleverly, I suppose. First, most rewards were cosmetic.
Right, didn't change how you played.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that kind of softened the blow initially. And second, the whole presentation was just slick. You know, the animations, the rarity colors.
Yeah, the spinning and the lights.
It created this real buzz, this feeling of anticipation, made you want to collect things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's really interesting is how it just normalized spending real money for a chance at digital stuff in a game you already paid for.
Okay, but hang on. Weren't there other games doing cosmetic boxes before? What made Overwatch the tipping point, as they called it?
That's a fair question.
Well,
I think what the source suggests is it was the sheer polish, maybe, and the huge audience.
Yeah.
Overwatch wasn't some niche-free game.
right, it was a major Blizzard release.
Exactly, and it baked the system in so smoothly, made it look appealing. And then you've got FIFA Ultimate Team.
Ah, yes, FUT. They compared it to collecting Pokemon cards, but, you know, with actual money.
Yeah.
That clicks, especially when you see how much people sink into building those teams.
It's a really spot-on comparison. That collecting instinct, the thrill of finding something rare, FUT taps right into it.
Mm-hmm.
And the big thing there is the link between opening packs, their loot boxes, and actually getting better players, building a stronger team.
So it's not just cosmetic.
No, it directly impacts competitiveness. That's a powerful reason to spend. And like the podcast said, by 2017, this whole loot box thing was worth $30 billion.
$30 billion,
Yeah.
Wow. That really gives you a sense of the scale we're talking about.
It's massive, a huge economic engine.
Did they mention how much of that might come from, like, whales, the big spenders?
They didn't break it down specifically, no. But you'd have to assume a pretty big chunk comes from those really dedicated, maybe even problem spenders.
Right. But it wasn't all smooth sailing, was it? The script really flags Star Wars Battlefront II. That was a big turning point.
Oh, definitely.
What made that one so explosive?
Battlefront 2, well, it arguably crossed the line for a lot of players. Instead of just looks, their boxes had stuff that gave you actual advantages in the game.
Ah, the pay-to-win thing.
Exactly. That term got thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
And it just triggered this huge backlash.
Within the Star Wars fan base, too, which is pretty passionate.
Right. It showed there was a limit to what players would accept monetization-wise, especially in a franchise people love that much. It really made people ask, you know, how far is too far?
And that anger seems tied into the psychology of it all. The podcast brought up variable ratio reinforcement. Sounds a bit technical.
It does, but the idea is simple.
Like slot machines, they said.
Precisely. It's a psychology term. You get a reward, but you don't know when. Not after every try, not after a set number of tries. It's unpredictable,
Right.
like pulling a slot machine lever. You don't know if the next pull is the jackpot, but that possibility keeps you going. Loot boxes work the same way.
The uncertainty.
Exactly. That uncertainty, plus the occasional win, maybe a rare item, it creates this really powerful loop, potentially quite addictive.
And they mentioned something about almost winning.
Yeah, that's part of it too. Sometimes you get something close to what you want, or you see the rare item spin past. It tricks your brain into thinking you're close, makes you want to try again, taps into how we see patterns, even when they aren't there.
which brings up the worry about kids. That example they used, the nephew spending allowance on Fortnite llamas.
Yeah, just for cosmetic stuff.
It really hits home, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How easily younger players could get sucked in.
It really does. Kids often don't have that same grasp of money or, the actual odds of getting the cool skin or whatever.
And the flashy visuals, the sounds.
Super appealing. Can lead to impulsive spending without really understanding the cost. It definitely raises questions about developer responsibility, protecting younger players.
And it wasn't just parents worrying, right? The podcast mentioned government stepping in. Belgium and the Netherlands in 2018,
Yes, that was a huge moment.
they actually called loot boxes gambling.
They did. They legally defined certain types of loot boxes as gambling, which meant they fell under much stricter laws.
Wow.
It was about that direct link, spending money for a chance outcome, like a lottery ticket, basically. The podcast mentions EA's reaction. It definitely sent ripples through the industry, forced some companies to change things, at least in those countries.
And then there was the player reaction itself. The podcast really focuses on Battlefront II again here.
The gamer backlash.
That
yeah.
Reddit thing, the pride and accomplishment comment, getting the most downvotes ever, that's kind of incredible. It shows the power of the community.
It really is a powerful example of players organizing and making their voices heard loudly. They felt exploited, basically, and used platforms like Reddit to push back. And the fact that EA actually did remove the pay-to-win stuff,
It worked.
it showed that player pressure can have a real impact. Companies need players, they need goodwill. They can't just ignore massive outrage like that.
But, like Alex and Jamie pointed out, things might have changed a bit on PC and console. But mobile gaming seems different. They mentioned Genshin Impact and gacha systems. Still very much a thing there.
Yeah, the mobile scene often plays by different rules. A lot of those games are free upfront.
So they rely on in-app purchases.
Heavily. And gacha, which is really just another name for loot boxes, often focused on collecting characters or items, is a core part of that model.
Is it just less regulated on mobile? Or players just accept it more?
Probably a bit of both. Maybe less regulatory heat in some places, and maybe it's just become normalized within that mobile gaming culture. It's an interesting split.
So, looking more broadly then, what other legal or regulatory things have happened since Battlefront 2? The podcast mentioned a few different responses.
Yeah, we've seen a mix. You've got industry groups like the ESRB adding labels.
Like contains in-game purchases.
Right. Sometimes more specific, like includes random items, trying to give consumers a heads up. More transparency. Then you have some U.S. states looking into actual age restrictions, debating if kids should be blocked from games with these mechanics. And then, as the podcast noted, places like Japan already had rules for similar things, like Kompu Gacha. They put limits on certain prize systems, so it shows there's no single answer. Different places are trying different things.
It does sound like the industry itself has maybe started to shift a bit, too. They give examples like Apex Legends going cosmetic only with its boxes,
Right.
and Halo Infinite using battle passes instead. Is that, like, progress, things getting better for players?
You could definitely see it that way. It suggests some developers are listening, trying alternatives. Battle passes, for instance, are usually more predictable. You see what you can earn.
Less gambling, more predictable progression.
Kind of, yeah. More transparency about what you get for your time or money. But, and it's a big but, the podcast stressed, the mobile world still often relies heavily on those chance-based mechanics.
Right. Still a bit of a Wild West there.
You could say that. Less regulated overall.
And then they dropped the NFT loot box idea. I gotta admit, I had the same reaction as Jamie. A little groaned.
It's definitely speculative, but given all the noise around NFTs and blockchain, maybe not that far-fetched.
Oh, dear.
Linking unique, tradable digital items to loot boxes. It just adds another layer of complexity. And potential issues around ownership, speculation, regulation would be a nightmare.
Let's bring it back to Earth slightly. The personal stories in the podcast were pretty relatable. Alex spending $50 on CS:GO crates for a disappointing purple skin.
Yeah, the anticlimax.
And Jamie wanting that specific Mercy skin in Overwatch and getting a frog emote.
Small chuckle sound implied the frog emote, right?
I think anyone who's ever opened a loot box or even like a pack of trading cards gets that feeling. I've definitely felt the pull with those FIFA packs. That Pokemon card comparison makes total sense. It's that urge to complete the set, find the rare one.
But with real money on the line.
Exactly.
And those little stories, even though they're kind of funny, they really capture that core issue. The randomness, the potential disappointment. You spend money, but there's no guarantee you get what you actually want or anything you feel is worth it.
It feels like a gamble because, well, it is.
Pretty much.
So wrapping things up, what are the main takeaways? The podcast finished with a sort of call to action. What should listeners, do with this info?
I think the main points were about pushing for a healthier gaming space. Things like supporting developers who use fairer monetization.
Voting with your wallet.
Exactly that. Also demanding transparency, knowing the actual odds, the drop rates for these boxes.
Mhm. Yeah, some places require that now, don't they?
Some do, yeah. And crucially, talking about it, especially parents talking to kids about spending in games.
Understanding what they're buying into.
Right. Ultimately, the message seemed to be that players do have power through their choices, and they can use that to nudge the industry towards practices that are fun, not just financially exploitative.
Okay, so just to quickly recap our deep dive based on that press start to rant discussion, we looked at how loot boxes started and evolved.
The history,
The whole debate about whether it's gambling,
the psychological hooks, the legal definitions.
how they've impacted game design and culture,
Big time.
the responses from governments and regulators around the world,
A real patchwork of approaches.
and kind of where things stand now, the shifts we're seeing and where things might still be dodgy.
Exactly. We've traced how this one feature blew up into a major controversy, forced government action, and made at least parts of the industry rethink how they operate.
Which leads us nicely to our final thought for you listening. Thinking about all this, the psychology involved, the different rules everywhere, what responsibility do you think we have as players in shaping how games make money in the future?
Yeah, what's our role in this?
And with tech always changing, gaming habits evolving, what else might be coming down the pipeline? For better? Or maybe for worse?
Definitely something to chew on. Lots of moving parts.
It is indeed. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.